So I'm going to run through a bit of a demonstration today and talk to you a bit about how we're putting together a virtual environment that will have demonstrations that partners can use. And what we're doing in those demonstrations is lining the sales example up. I'll just open one up so we can see it. This is an example of a sales example. We're going to line the sales examples up with a script on how to run a demo, as in like the order you should do things to run a demo on that sales example. So you're able to show clients the software working for these various sales examples. So this demo today will be on that sales example I was just showing you. We're going to show an example of setting up data quality for a data warehouse environment. Just a short example. And the new features in QFire 2.1 that we're going to be running through is database connectivity, which is self-explanatory. It's the ability to connect to a database. We can load data into that database with import and export definitions, or import definitions, and we can push data out of QFire into a database using export definitions. We've made a change to the application so that there's now localization settings, so you can run QFire on a server with any localization, and you can adjust the date and time settings so it matches the local date-time format. And finally, I'm not going to run through this today, but we do have a RESTful API for the product now, which allows you to automate QFire, so it could be part of a batch process or integrated into another application, so you can use QFire to execute data quality processes. So the Northwind Traders demo I'm going through today, if you don't know the Northwind database, it's a company of about 10 employees, and they do sales, and they have customers, and they have products. And the demo today, we're going to look at their customers table, and what we're going to do is we're just going to try and capture this problem with the company name, where we got missing company names in the customers table. If you can see those two blue highlighted cells. So pretty simple validation rule. We're going to, using the new function to import a dataset definition, we're going to import the dataset definition from SQL Server, create that validation rule. We're going to create an import definition, which is the instructions to get that customers table into QFire, the actual data itself. We're going to run that import definition. We'll have a look at the results, create a firewall rule, and then using that firewall rule, we'll set up an export definition just on successful rows that made it through that firewall. And finally, we'll have a look at those successful rows not actually in SQL Server, we're going to look at that in the BI product. So I'll bring up the application. So the first thing you'll notice if you're familiar with QFire is there's a new icon in the bottom right-hand corner called Automation, which is also up here. Automation is where we create database connections in QFire. So I'm going to click into Automation, and we're going to start off the process of creating the database connection. At this stage, we're the administrator user. The administrator user creates database connections, and the reason for that is database connections can be shared across multiple users, but the credentials are only entered once. So we'll call the database connection Northwind Traders. That's the address of the database, and Northwind Traders. So at this stage, we can test the connection, and we can see that's been successful. And then we have the ability to choose how it's going to be used. The three options are submission, export, and dataset configuration. If we tick submission, then we have the ability now to load data into QFire from a database. If we choose export, we now have the ability to push data back into that database. And if we choose dataset configuration, we now have the ability to use the metadata of that database to create a dataset in QFire. The reason we've put it like this is we want people to be able to control what those databases can be used for. And a good reason for that is you might want to restrict users from writing tables back into a database, for example, if it's being used for, if it's part of an application. So we press Add, and that puts our database connection in there. So now if I go to data collection, what we're going to do now is, as the data steward, we're going to add a data set. So we press Add Dataset, and we have this new option now to import a dataset definition. So this is our database connection we created and a list of tables in that database. So we go to Customers, and when we press Create, we can see that our dataset is created straight away. If we click on columns, you can see these are the columns that came from the database table. Customer ID, company name, contact name, etc. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a validation rule. The validation rule we want to create is just the one to test that the company name isn't blank. Pretty straightforward one. So we're going to call it mandatory validation checks or validation rules. That's our group. And we'll go, I'll call it rule 001. Test company name is filled. I'm not going to get into too much detail on this. We're just going to set it up so it's got the minimum amount of information to work. Owned by data steward. And we're going to say, is text missing? Company name is false. So take note here that I've set the severity to critical. We're going to say this is a critical error if this fails. So I press add, and we now have that rule in place. So what I'm going to do now is add a firewall rule, because what we want to do is make sure any rows that have a critical error don't make it through to our successful rows. So we say restrict critical rows. So we choose severity critical, and you can see fail entire row for this severity. I'm going to press add. So we've got a firewall rule in place now. So the next step is to create our submission and export definitions. So I'll start with the submission definition. We press add submission definition. We're going to go load customer dataset from SQL Server. We choose the customers table. We press add. And we're going to add an export definition, which is going to be load successful customers table. So we can load successful or unsuccessful rows. We're going to say successful. We're going to say the table already exists. DBO customers successful. I could also just type in a table here if I wanted to, and it'll create a new table. And what we're going to tell it to do is drop and recreate that table. So we press add. And we have our two submission and export definitions. So that's all we really need to do to set up a data set so that it can receive data from a database and push data back to a database. Now, if I go to our submission page, this is where I can where previously we could upload CSV files and flat files. Now we can also do a submission template, to load through a submission template. I should say at this stage, what I'm going through here with a submission template of loading that data can also be achieved using the API. So we could trigger this process from the API. So I'll say test submission. We press save. And what's going to happen now is this is in the background is going to load. There it is. Refreshes every few seconds. So that's completed. As we drill in, we can see the company name isn't filled. We've got a couple of rows to be actioned. If we drill in, we can see those two are blank, which is row 1 and 9. This table doesn't have a key on it, so there's no key to show here. So then I'll go back to my submission, here, and I can export the submission results. So I go to export submission results. I click on the little new button here, which is the export template. Choose load successful customers. Execute export. And we can see that's executed now. So if I go over and look at SQL Server, I'm going to select from this table, we can see this has excluded those two rows that we were showing before. And what we've achieved there basically is the ability to very quickly load a database table with some successful data, which could be used, for example, in some business intelligence. My session's logged out. 1 second. So just a nice little report on that data we just loaded. So you can see how it's pretty easy to get data from a database. You can use those rules, those rows, the unsuccessful and successful, and then you can use those results in BI. In this case, I've used it to do a bit of a chart around that data, but you could use it to show the user surface to the users, the unsuccessful rows, or you could do that through the database, or you could do that through the UI. Are there any questions so far? I was running through a couple more things after they've taken any questions.
Okay, Tim, I've just unmuted everybody so that so they can actually talk if they want to.
Thank you. Nope. Okay, I'll move on. So the next thing I'll show you quickly is localization. So if I go to administration, so you can see now in administration there's a tab for settings. If we go there, we can see we have these new preferences for short and long date format, and short time and long time format. So we can adjust these, as I mentioned a bit earlier, to work with the different localities. At the moment it's set to American. I can set it to Australian, and we can add more formats to those if people are requesting them. So that's it for the demo of the new feature. It's nice and powerful, but we've kept it straightforward so that people can achieve this without too much technical knowledge.
Cool, thanks, Tim.
Any more questions? No worries, Neil.
Okay, so that was really all we wanted to show you today. It was really just to give you a quick introduction to some of the things we're doing from a process point of view with 2.1, some of the things that we're making available from I guess, a sales aid point of view, and then additionally just to show you how much simpler we've actually made the product to use while adding the power of actually giving the ability to connect it straight to a database. So that version will deploy to everybody's demo environments the beginning of next week. So it'll be there and available to play with from the beginning of next week. Likewise, please check the email I sent out. We are doing a deeper dive on database connectivity on the 18th. And if you don't have that schedule, send me a note, remind me, and I'll resend it to you. And then we're actually doing a short session demonstrating and presenting the textual ETL product on the 20th. So again, we'll be running all of those things for 3 time zones. So working so that you can do it comfortably within your business day. And it's part of understanding where QFire is actually going. Okay? Cool. So if there are no...
Can I ask a question?
Sure, of course you can.
Yeah. Hi, Neil. Hi, Tim. It's Stuart here, Stuart McLaughlin. In that actual working example, so having identified the fact that you've got 2 rows with a missing primary key data, I guess you've got the option of either fixing it at source, and then would you delete the whole table and reinsert, or can you just add those 2 rows, or have you got various methods for doing that?
Stuart, we can push out the unsuccessful or successful rows. So what you can use is at the moment there's no way to go and fix that in the source database. That's a bit of a touchy subject, and we want to get that one right in the future. But at the moment you use that information, for example, to understand what you need to fix. Or if you can use it as part of the file, or you can use it as a way of just allowing the successful rows through to your source databases.
Tim, just a question on that. If it's subsequently resubmitted though, and those two rows are fixed, it'll only take notice of those 2 rows, not everything again, won't it?
It depends. It depends if you've actioned them or not. If you've actioned those rows, then it will ignore them when they come through again.
Yeah.
We've also got a feature. Yep.
I'm thinking about the situation which is probably more realistic, where you've already got a table with a lot of rows in it, which have been previously processed. So you don't want to
Oh,
have to
sorry. I see what
clear
you're saying.
down the table. You just want to add the rows once your incoming data is clean. Yes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Are you saying you only want to load each time? You only want to load the new rows that have been created to test them?
Well, I mean, do you have the choice? Is it all or nothing, or can you sort of load the good ones and then load the fixed ones?
We've got a change data capture feature coming in for database connectivity.